Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. It's great that you can all join us on this wet and windy day here in the UK. My name's Stuart Dorman. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Sabio. I'm going to be the host for this webinar this morning, which is going to be focusing on unlocking the potential of your number one asset, which is the people that work within your organisation, particularly those that work in the contact centre. I'm joined by some friends today, so to participate in the conversation. So I'm just going to quickly go around and introduce my friends here. So Natalie, would you mind going first, please?
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. I'm Nat Wiggins. I'm one of the contact centre specialists here at Twilio. I'm very much focused on building out positive, memorable experiences to help make life easier for both our customers and our employees. And it's nice to be here. Hi, Stu.
Thank you, Nat. It's great that you could join us today. Look forward to catching up later on. Tverko, would you mind going next, please?
Pardon, sorry, I'm speaking to muted mic. My name is Tvrtko Stosic. I work for Avaya Central Contact Center Specialist team. My responsibility is to support local Avaya teams and partners with complex customers and strategic deals across EMEA region. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, and thanks for joining us today. Amanda, would you mind going next, please?
Thanks, Stuart. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Halpin, and I'm the Senior Solution Lead for Digital and AI at Genesys. And my role enables our customers to use all those new innovations that we have in digital and AI to make a more seamless customer experience.
Brilliant, thanks, Amanda. Look forward to hearing more about those a bit later on. And finally, Chris, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, morning everybody. I'm Chris Rainsforth. Work for Verint as part of their solutions consulting team across EMEA, focusing on resource management, WFM across front and back offices, really just to try and drive a more flexible approach to how we plan for our teams.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. So we've got some real subject matter experts here today from the leading organisations globally providing technology into the customer service domain. So really look forward to to having a conversation later on. Please also feel free to post questions through the webinar session. We can fill those questions out to our experts, so it's a great opportunity to get some questions answered by, as I say, by some of the leading experts in the industry. So just to kick things off, I'd like to just have a sort of reflect on where the industry is at the moment, and particularly the focus on how we communicate as humans. We love to talk as humans. We've been using our voices for thousands of years to engage in commerce, to exchange complex ideas, and to build relationships. And for most of that period, our voices were constrained by distance. But about 150 odd years ago, someone invented the telephone, and that removed that constraint and allowed us to start to communicate with people all over the world. Now, it took probably another century or so for the telephone to become ubiquitous, by which point it had firmly established itself as the primary way that we communicate with each other and the way that we communicate with businesses when we're over a distance. And that led to an explosion in contact centres across the world, particularly here in the UK, where we actually have one of the most sophisticated industries in the world. In fact, in size and scale, it's second only to the US. And really contact centres have established themselves as the dominant way that the mechanism through which we can engage with customers, help them with support, and obviously help them through the sales process. But about 20 or so years ago, a new paradigm came along, a new set of tools came along that allowed us to communicate with customers in different ways through graphical user interfaces, initially delivered through web browsers, through the internet, and then ultimately through mobile applications. And this led to a lot of people thinking, well, is this going to replace voice, or will it replace communications and conversation? Will the graphical user interface ultimately be the way that most people engage with organizations and the call center will disappear? Well, obviously that hasn't happened yet. And then obviously another few years later, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had lots of press around AI in particular and the focus on conversational AI. Will that ultimately replace the call center agent? Will it destroy lots of jobs? Well, again, we're still in the very early stages of this technology maturing, and we certainly haven't seen, the impact yet of that on the agent and on conversation. But what we are seeing is that all of the simple calls are starting to disappear as more and more people carry out those simple tasks either through graphical user interfaces or conversational user interfaces. In fact, if you look at average talk times in a typical contact center, they've gone up by 50% just in the last decade alone. So all of the simple calls are disappearing, which is leaving it, you know, the hard, difficult, complex calls there for our employees to deal with. So the job is becoming much more complicated. So the questions, hopefully, that we're going to explore a bit today are, first of all, you know, to question whether we're providing the right tools to our agents to solve customer problems. As the job gets more complicated, they need better information at their fingertips through the desktop applications that we provide them. But quite often, and I'm sure you will have all seen this, when we go into contact centres, we still witness agents having to navigate their way through incredibly complex applications, having to cut and paste data between different solutions. And it's a challenge, and we need to do a better job of providing the right tools. We've also, you know, we're still in the throes of this global pandemic, which has really changed behaviours, both from customer behaviours, but also the way that we service customers through home working. We've got an entirely new cohort of customers that have come online over the last 18 months, people that would have previously never dreamt of doing their shopping online, doing their banking online, using video conferencing, have had to start adopting these tools. And that's led to a group of what I call digital novices coming online that need help and assistance, that are trying to use digital channels but haven't yet, you know, aren't as well versed as those of us that have been using them for many years. So our call centres need to pick up on that and deal with those issues. And obviously home working has now become the norm for many people as well. We're kind of falling back into a hybrid way of working, but home working can be challenging, particularly for call centre agents that are dealing with call after call. You know, they can no longer put their hand up and get their supervisor's attention for support in the way that they could do before. And it can be quite a tough, isolating job for those people just dealing with calls, you know, lots and lots of calls. So we need to bear that in mind in terms of well-being. And I guess the other question we ask ourselves as well is whether we're measuring the right things. Now, to be a call centre agent, it's probably one of the most measured and scrutinised jobs in the world. Every single second of your time has to be accounted for. And obviously that manifests itself through productivity metrics typically. And there's always been a big focus on, you know, productivity within the contact centre. But maybe we need to start broadening that out. You know, we've in recent years focused much more on customer experience, but maybe we need to start thinking about agent experience and employee experience as well, and repurposing some of that data, looking at it through a different lens to try and get a better view on how our staff are, how the well-being of our staff are. Because we know from evidence, we know from, you know, what's going on in the industry, that staff burnout is a real thing now, particularly over the last 18 months with people working at home, lots of pressures with family. You know, staff well-being is suffering, and the way that that's manifesting itself is through agent attrition, which we know is the #1 mega trend at the moment within the industry. Staff attrition rates are approaching 30% in some sectors. So we need to focus on that and try and manage the impact of that. We know that this is costing, if you've got a 100-seat call centre, this could be costing you up to £1 million a year in terms of, you know, managing the staff turnover. So it's a real issue that we need to deal with. So with that in mind, we know that our service advisors are hurting at the moment. We know it's a difficult job. We know that the last year and a half has been difficult. So I'm going to turn to our panelists now, and we're going to start asking some questions on how we can think about, you know, how we can serve our advisors, you know, in a more effective way. So first of all, how can organisations humanise their customer experience whilst leveraging new technology? Nat, I'm going to ask that question to you first. Would you mind answering that question for me?
Yeah, of course. I guess for me, it's very much about balance, right? And it's being able to not just walk in your customer's shoes, but also walk in your agent's shoes and understand the experience that your agents are having to go through to service those customers. So getting the balance between automation and self-service and then the human element. And I think for me, it's very important that when we start looking at moving those sort of more transactional activities and the call deflection, that we're not then trying to do a full customer deflection as well. So make sure there is always an element of that sort of human connection so that they can reach out at any point. So I'm all for automation and AI, and I think it's extremely valuable in how it can help and support, and especially with some of the more complex queries that the advisors have to deal with. Having those tools to help and prompt them through that is vital. But yeah, for me, it's very much around understanding the balance of where the technology can reduce effort and make life easier for both the customer and the employee.
Thank you, Nat. Yeah, I agree. It's thinking about how we can use technology, I think, to support employees and AI in particular. Maybe we'll explore that in a bit more detail later on about how we can think about AI not just as a customer-facing technology, but one that can be there to sit and listen and support advisors as well. Chris, what's your take on this?
No, I agree with Natalie. I think the balance is the key in terms of making sure we've got technology that supports our people, but making sure that technology doesn't hinder what we're trying to achieve from a customer outcome perspective. I think every customer needs to have an outlet, so there needs to be an escalation or there needs to be a route into the human to be able to deal with things, but then that human needs to be equipped to be able to deal with that query, because typically those queries, like you said, are going to be more complex, more intricate, need more effort, need a bit more empathy, whatever those things might be. And I think we just need to make sure we can provide that support for our people to enable them to have the right conversation to deliver the right outcome.
And in your view, Chris, what is that? Is it sort of around coaching, development, those types of tools, as well as the actual applications themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I think coaching and development's critical. I think we to your point before, we scrutinise agents to within a minute of their day, and I think we've got an opportunity through technology to make sure we leverage capacity to deal with that value add activity that is going to add value to our people and provide the support that they need to multi-skill more people, give them more variety, whatever those things might be, to aid them in terms of their career development. So I think coaching and development plays a massive part here. But I think on the flip side of that, there is technology that will support them in that day-to-day interaction. So being able to have something like a really intuitive knowledge base or something like that, which means they can get to an answer quickly, to be able to resolve that situation quickly without the need or the panic of trying to fix every situation that comes through. I think it's balance between, to Natalie's point, balance between the technology and actually how we support our people.
And do you think as an industry we've been a bit too focused on productivity in recent years, given the fact that, to your point, we are measuring everything down to the last second?
I think we're getting better as an industry. When I first started, I've been in this 25 years. When I first started, you couldn't do anything without someone scrutinising. If you stood up, you'll be, and that's why you're standing up. But I think we are getting better as an industry, and we are starting to realise. And I think, the last 2 years has been testament to how quick we can react to different situations and quick to react to the needs of our people and employee engagement and those types of things. I think have taken a massive step forward, and we're more focused now on the customer outcome in the majority. I'm not saying everyone's working in a way that we would deem as best practice, but we would look at it and go, I think we are seeing people take that shift and go, what, our people are under a lot of pressure. The responsibility now is on the organisation to try and relieve some of that pressure for our people. It's the demanding job that they've got, the front line of their business. And we're starting to see people really take more of an interest in the development and kind of support of their teams, as opposed to kind of making sure all the widgets are hitting the right kind of metrics.
Thanks, Chris. Turko, I'm going to turn to you next. What's your thoughts on how we can use technology to humanise the experience a bit more?
So first of all, I would say that customer experience for most of the companies that I'm working with is still quite human. But now we are running into danger to dehumanize it with abuse of technology. And I agree with Chris and Natalie, it is about the balance. We need to separate the tasks where technology is good in and where humans are good in. And as general guideline, I would always use technology, automated technology, meaning web, smartphone, bots, for information, education, and different task completions. And humans should be used for complex recommendations, for objective advices, for accessing experts, etc. And here in human-assisted engagements, technology should support humans, not replace them. And I fully agree with what you just showed, that contacts that are reaching agents are more complex than ever before. because products and services are becoming more and more complex, regulations are becoming stricter, and customers are more and more able to satisfy their standard requests using self-services solutions. That's why we need technology to support our agents. But again, it is not just about technology. These complex contacts that are reaching agents are requiring agent empowerment. So we cannot anymore use contact answering robots that are good in following procedures and rules. We need agents who are creative thinkers, who are problem solvers, who own their work and relationship with customers. And of course, technology can help here, but it is deeper thing. To have empowered agents, we need actually to rethink and redesign contact center KPIs, quality management process, performance management process, etc., etc., etc. So it is it is combination of technology and concepts on business level that we need to apply.
Brilliant. Thanks, Verko. Amanda, what are your thoughts on sort of using technology to humanize the experience a bit more?
I think all of our panelists have brought up really good, relevant points. So I agree with everything, the balance. But what I really resonated with me there was the employee empowerment. So at the end of the day, when the AI has done the simple task and when the customer needs to be routed to an agent, at the end of the day, that person is a human. And if they're not feeling well today, if they're not bought into the company and to why they're there, you know, what's their reason to come to work? Is it just paycheck? If they're not bought into it, it's going to come across in the interaction. So it is all about making sure that the employee is empowered, but they're also engaged in the objectives of the organization that they're working for, that they really understand that it's not just coming in, answering calls or web chats or whatever it may be. It's actually really helping someone in their daily lives and making a difference. So we always have to remember that. How can we ensure that your employees are engaged in what they're doing? And it's not just turn up and be robotic, i.e. answer questions. It's actually caring and being empathetic in each of those interactions that they have.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because that talks not just to technology but to culture really, and for the agent to be bought into whatever the role there is within their organization. So culture management, team leadership, all that is a really important thing in your view.
100%. And there's so many ways that you can harvest that culture, from having competitions, that kind of influences employees to do the right thing for their customer, not scrutinizing your AHT as much, for example. So re-looking at that, because as you said, Stuart, at the beginning, the conversations are becoming more complex. So what your AHT was a year ago, it's not reflective. So having things like interesting gamification days, looking at how you can actually look at performance and do real coaching. And coaching that's not just to improve the AHT, but it's actually to improve the development of that person and have a career path for them, so they know if they are bought in and if they delight their customers, that they're going to reap those benefits as well.
Interesting. So I think the general consensus now, I don't know if you've got any sort of final comments on this, seems to be that we maybe have placed a bit too much emphasis on digital graphical user interfaces, trying to shift the customer to digital, maybe to the detriment of the employee experience. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think what a lot of organizations have started to realize is that you can't deploy an experience based on the technology. You've got to deploy the experience based on the people element. So there's more sort of people-based strategy that we're starting to see. So we talk about sort of customer journey mapping a lot, but it's also about employee experience and the experience that the employees are now having to go through to then manage those customer journeys and the customer outcomes. So it's reassuring to see for me that there is this kind of put the people first. understand where their frustrations are and where their pain points are. So not just looking at it from a customer perspective, but how the employees build the experience internally to actually meet those demands and needs of the external customers.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I mean, we've, organizations have spent a huge amount of time building customer-facing experiences and scrutinizing the design of the websites and so on. But that same care and attention, I don't think, has been paid to thinking about employee experiences and maybe the tools, the design of the tools for employees. So maybe as that role becomes more complicated, that's a bit of a wake-up call, really. We do need to focus a bit more time on that. So very interesting. So just moving on to the next question. How important is it not to lose the human touch throughout customer journeys? I'm going to turn to you, Chris, if that's okay, to start and give some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's so important. I think back to Natalie's point, right? So when we look at customer journey, it's about understanding the human impact of that, both at a customer level, but fundamentally our employee level. I think, our resources, our people that are doing the job day by day, understand where the frustrations lie in process. You understand where the frustrations lie in the requests that they're given by the customer. And they're the first part of call to go, is something working or not? And I think by engaging with those teams and those people to really understand what are the pain points for their, for the operation to resolve an issue, can only make the customer journey better. I think sometimes we take it up too far of a level and we try to map it out at a level that doesn't actually understand the impact of our people and how that information flows from one department to another department. And we when some of the work I'm doing, when we're going in and looking at kind of how that tracks from department to department, that's where the pain is. The actual little bit here that they deal with as an individual might be okay, but the bottleneck stems from the flow of information from one place to another, and actually having that conversation at an agent level and goes, what are the things that you're getting pushed back on? What are the things that you're getting transferred to you that are not relevant or are struggling to resolve? That's where we can start to understand how the journey is impacting our people. And I think that's our starting point, that collaboration with the agent to understand that is really important to make sure that customer journey really works.
Right. So that's interesting. So that internal handoff piece that you mentioned is quite interesting, because it sounds like what you're seeing is you're not giving frontline advisors the ability to deliver that human touch if they either don't have the information about what's going on in the background, or they're having to wait for processes to be fulfilled. Is that fair?
To a degree. So I think what we see is, so we, if I look at it across the organisation and I go, contact centre, we've invested really heavily in the contact centre over the years, whether that's analytical technology, whether it's improved WFM practices, whatever those things are, we've invested quite a bit, knowledge management, etc., etc. What I tend to see is that investment doesn't flow through the organisation. So if you've got a traditional front office, back office, the back office is really being underfunded through that same period. So yes, we can get all the insight we need in terms of delivering that customer interaction at that point of contact, but when that work or that information can't, or that situation can't be resolved there, it needs to move through into a different team or a different department. That same level of visibility isn't there. So actually the two don't marry up. So from a process perspective, it might be their process at front end point, it's a 24-hour resolution time, and that's communicated to the customer, but actually there's a backlog of 3 or 4 days within that back office environment, and that information is not visible to the front office. So we're giving wrong expectation at day one. The advisors themselves are doing the job and following the process and following the information that's available to them, but we know we failed that customer before it's even gone through to the next stage of that process. And it's just aligning some of those things and making sure that any investment we make is kind of, there's parity across the areas that are impacting that customer journey, and I don't think we've got that fully across the industry yet.
Interesting. So we can have the world's greatest front end touch point to the customer, but if the back office isn't fulfilling, then ultimately they're just dealing with failure demand and having to juggle plates. The customer suffers.
And the knock-on effect of that is the repeat contact. So, if for me, it's that repetitive contact that if we do have that parity investment and we solve where that issue lies, the slipstream benefit back into the front office in terms of reduced demand because we're not getting chased, reduced complaints, those types of things are massive benefits. And it frees up the time that we need to actually spend developing our people, because that's where your capacity comes in, and that's where the value add activity becomes really important. It's just about finding the right balance between that and making sure we have that same level of consistency across the areas that impacts the customer journey.
And I guess it makes the role of the frontline advisor a bit more enjoyable, because instead of dealing with daily demand and complaints all of the time, they're actually they're able to solve customer problems. So it makes the job itself a lot more enjoyable. Tverko, what's your take on this one?
So I think that importance of human touch across customer journey is huge. Let me give you one example. A couple of years ago, I was involved in a web shop project for one Central European telco. We fully automatized based on web buying process. So customer would insert his data, and then system would suggest, including his wife, children, everything, whom he wants to have under contract, and system would suggest to customer ideal devices, ideal tariff packages, etc., etc., etc. It was working perfectly, but guess what? After going through self-service recommendations and getting final offer, customers were massively calling contact center because they just wanted that human agent confirms, dear Mr. or Mrs. Customer, yes, this is the right option for you. So after all intelligence implemented in those self-services, after correct recommendation, customers still wanted human touch, customers still wanted human to assure him that this is the right option. And this is like, I would say, very good example. It is not just related to sales, it is also related, to retention, it is related to acquisition. These things should be done by human. In general, humans should handle contacts that are complex, that are emotional, and that matter to relationship the most. This is the importance of human touch.
Interesting. So in the example that you gave there, the human touch was just about reassuring the customer that their request was in action.
Yes. Can you believe that? Can you this was like eye-opener for me, because I was big fan of automation and stuff, but then I started to think in bit different direction, because the essence is that we are humans and we want to buy for humans, we want to communicate with humans, and that's it. There is no automation that can change this, in my eyes.
Interesting. So in your view, then, it's some customers, particularly if it's an emotive issue or something quite complicated, they just need that reassurance that their problem has been solved, their issue has been dealt with.
They want touch with human. And by the way, it is not just about customer, it is about the companies, because I was looking at interesting Gartner's report that was measuring customer action after interaction. And that determined that actions customers are least likely to buy or to continue relationship after fully automated interactions.
Interesting.
And the best way to sell, the best way to retain, the best way to acquire is combination, actually, good balance, as other panelists also said, good balance between automated and human assisted interactions. And of course, again, human needs to be supported by technology, not replaced, but supported, because of complexity of contacts today.
So that would indicate that the push for most organizations to digitize as much as they can at the moment, particularly from a human customer engagement perspective, is not necessarily the right strategy. As you say, we need to get that blend of human and digital.
Well, I can tell you that our largest and most complex customers had that pressure to fully digitalize maybe 4 years ago, but now they are almost all looking for the balance.
Yeah,
I can see that this tide of automation is, I will not say changing direction, but it is going into some balanced, well-balanced area. And then again, technology, artificial intelligence, context-sensitive knowledge bases, and all these kind of things are used to support human, not to replace it. Again, there are some things where automation is good, as I mentioned in the answer on the first question, but there are things that humans should deal with. definitely.
Amanda, I notice you're nodding along to a few of the points there. What's your take on that?
So I completely agree, and especially if you think about outside the contact center, if you look at marketing teams are using automation, they're using AI to segment customers, to offer recommendations on the website. So and all that's automated. However, if that person then calls the contact center and is offered a different product, it's really inconsistent, and it means that it will result in the customer not having faith in either the agent or what they've seen on the website. So it is all about bringing that information through, letting the AI do what it's good at, you know, sorting and analyzing vast amount of data and being able to recommend something and having that at every touch point. So in an automated way, and you know, if you see an offer recommendation, you know, purchase now, 50% off on the website. If you're speaking with someone in the contact center, they can say, by the way, you know, you're still eligible for that offer that you may have seen on the website. And also, by the way, I know that you have an outstanding ticket. It's being worked on. Rest assured, don't worry. So it just creates that more consistent messaging and reassures the customer that the person they're actually talking to knows their stuff about them, and it's not just in and out. It's a personalized experience.
You raise a really interesting point there, Amanda, because I think one of the challenges that I know that we, you know, as the technologists, if you like, in this industry have been talking about for probably many years now is this disconnect between digital experiences and the human experiences, and the fact, as you highlighted with the example there, that I can do something online, but as soon as I then engage with the person, maybe in a contact center, all of that context is lost, and I've got to start and explain all over again, or it's an inconsistent message. Do you think we've solved that problem now? And if so, you know, what's kind of slowing down the adoption of people actually deploying that in the real world?
I think with the acceleration to cloud, especially that has been driven by the pandemic, has definitely enabled us to do that. It's a problem that we've been talking about, but it has been quite hard to solve. But now with the acceleration to cloud, we're seeing through APIs and through systems actually being able to connect, it's a lot easier to connect those disparate systems and just have one source of truth.
Yeah.
So we're getting there, but it is going to take time for everyone to be at that standard.
Yeah, interesting. Nat, what's your take on that? I know this is something you know you and I have spoken about in the past in terms of joining those experiences together.
Yeah, and I agree with Amanda and Chris and the other panelists. For me, this breaks trust. If you don't have all of those journeys joined up, all of the data collected, and the data follows along the way, that's when the breakdown happens, as we've just discussed, and it breaks the trust. So for me, it's kind of, you know, making your customers feel valued and not making them do all the hard work. So if you're capturing this information along the way, then actually use it in a more meaningful way. So as Amanda said, make it more personalized. As Chris said, you need to build that reassurance. So each moment or each point in that interaction and in that experience, all of that data is coming with you. So the customer feels, as we've said, reassured, they feel valued, they understand that you know what they're trying to do and that you're trying to meet the needs of that particular outcome. And I think that's where the technology plays a really good part. So with all of the sort of the CDP platforms out there, capturing that information and doing something meaningful with it to give that reassurance is key. And I'm not saying that, you know, every complex situation needs a human. I think, again, if the technology is underpinning that experience and along the journey, the communication is there and the reassurance is there, then that's the most important thing. And also for me, it's being able to communicate in a human way. So if you're using those digital channels, make sure that the communication is clean, so that you're talking the same language. And we see this, you know, it can get really complex, can't it, in the sort of financial and insurance world. And if you're trying to sort of pass information in an automated way, it needs to make sure that you're speaking a language that the customer understands. So remove all of the jargon. And make sure the information that you're sending is snappy, easy to read, easy to digest, and show some kind of level of personality. And I know we've sort of talked about empathy. Amanda touched on empathy there. But again, using those tools to build some of those sort of personalities and the more human touch into the process.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned CDP there. Do you mind sort of elaborating a bit more on what you're referring to there?
Yeah, so we've got a customer data platform, which you're probably aware of, that we acquired an organization called Segment, and that allows us to literally capture every piece of information and data and touch point as a customer goes through a particular website. They might go through an IVR, they might make a phone call, they might make a web chat, whatever the different interaction points are, we're capturing and holding that information all the time. So we can see what they've been looking at, we know what their preferences are from a contact perspective, we know their purchase history, you know, so if they've been looking online for a particular vehicle that they choose to purchase, we'll know which vehicle they've looked at, and then we can just pull all of that information in to just make it that much more personalized experience. So again, showing them that we know who they are, we know what they're interested in, we know what their preferences are, and then almost predicting why they might be interacting with us at that time, and then being able to pull dynamically the information through and then sharing that with the advisors if the customer wants to actually speak to someone. I think that's the really key point. I think Amanda mentioned it about being dynamic with the information that you're pulling through. So rather than just a static screen pop as the customer comes through, you're pulling all of that really rich data that we've captured in the CDP platform, and then make that interaction much more meaningful.
So data is key, and it's an obvious statement to make, because the whole industry is, you know, talking about data and, you know, it being the most valuable commodity that any organisation has. But it's all very well talking about data, but the question is, how do you exploit it and how do you surface it to people that can actually do something with it? And I think to Amanda's point as well, as you know, it's presenting information to advisors that gives them context on who the customer is, what their journey's been, why they're contacting, you know, maybe if they've been on your website before, making sure that that information's available so that they can apply the human touch and they can deliver a personalized experience. And I guess one sort of final point on this, Chris, it's, you know, one of the challenges I think that we've seen, and again, going back to Amanda's point around the disconnect between digital and contact centre, is the technology's been there really for quite a few years to be able to join these experiences together. And I think Nat mentioned customer data platforms, you know, a lot of data exists. Often it's internal departmental silos that have been the barrier to, you know, to really expanding on what can be done in this space. I don't know if what's your view on that, Chris? Do you think that is the...
No, I fully agree. I think in terms of the ownership of data is a massive challenge for people in organisation. People want their little segment of information that's going to help them with their day-to-day kind of role, but I think we're in a position or in a place now as an industry that all data is really powerful for everybody, and actually being able to draw that customer journey and being able to understand kind of the pain points that everyone needs access to the data, and having that in some kind of central repository is really powerful. I think the other side to it is just ensuring that, you know, when we have the conversations around how do we improve the customer journey, how do we improve our employee experience, whatever those things are, that the right balance of people is part of that. I think everyone's got some level of ownership for this, regardless of where you sit within the organisation. And sometimes the contact centre is left to not to its own devices, that's probably the wrong phrase, but they're left to manage themselves and deal with things, and they'll put initiatives in place and they'll do things, but they don't bleed then through the organisation, and you start to get a mismanagement of kind of resource and mismanagement of information. So I think it is around people taking a step back and having that collective view of what they need to do, look at the outcomes that they're trying to achieve as an organisation, and then come together to develop the strategy in terms of how they move that forward.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. So, you know, I think it's clear then from all of us agreeing that the human touch is really important, and potentially we are now re-recognizing that, having invested so much time in building digital experiences and maybe trying to drive everyone online, and maybe neglecting the importance of the human touch. It now seems, particularly to Tverko's point, there is some evidence showing that the human touch is really important. We're recognizing that now, and maybe getting the right balance between the two is where the focus should be. So some really interesting points there. So next question, what solutions can organisations implement to support their agents' mental health and well-being? So we're starting to sort of move more onto employees and how we can benefit them. I'm going to point the first question to Tverko. Would you mind giving us your take on that, please?
Yes, look, I read your related white paper, and I really like them. I like that. I especially liked that you mentioned that all those technologies, advanced technologies that we are using for customer experience, we now need to turn inward to use it for employee experience. And I'm sure that Chris will agree with me that technologies like speech analytics, like desktop process analytics, can really give us a lot of information about agent effort, about gaps in processes, gaps in trainings, coachings, application support, and similar. So this is definitely one thing. Other thing is related to supporting agents during interactions, because as we said, today automation is solving most of the standard tasks, so agents are getting really complex stuff. Here we have a variety of intelligent assistants, so solutions that can process agent-customer conversation in real time and then drive actions and guide agents through knowledge management, through different workflows, etc., etc., etc. And what I see especially is important is collaboration, because what we are seeing, if we allow agents to easily get in touch and collaborate with their peers, but also with people from other departments, back office, branch, field technicians, performance are increasing dramatically. And also in this time of social distancing, collaboration within the team and out of the team can help agents with sense of inclusion, what again improves their well-being and mental state as such. So these are some of the tools, but related to agent health and well-being, I would say that the most important thing is again not what's happening on technology level, but on business concept level. So we need to change and rethink KPI structure. Because I mean, we are talking so much about employee experience, etc., but it is really unbelievable that most of contact centers are still obsessed with traditional efficiency metrics, like service level, like average handling time, etc. I'm not saying that we need to abandon those metrics. Contact center must be efficient, but if we want that our agents provide superb customer experience and that they still have normal well-being, normal mental health, etc., we need to rethink and redesign this traditional KPI logic, because how can you expect from your agents to feel well and to provide excellent experience to customer if you are pressing him with rigid average handling time? Or how you can expect your agents to help his colleagues if you are pressing hard occupancy objectives? This doesn't work that way. These are contradictions. So we need to rethink KPI structures, and we need to redefine according to that quality management, performance management, training processes, etc., etc., etc. And then all those tools that I mentioned have a lot of sense.
Interesting. So I think what you're saying there is we've got the data, we've got the tools, we're just maybe not measuring the right things. We need to use a different lens.
Exactly. Exactly. I can see the leading companies that I'm working with are now integrating their customer experience and employee experience programs, and they are creating a common set of measurements for customer experience and employee experience. So measurements that are falling in categories of ease, satisfaction, and recommendations. And this is, I think, the way. And then, of course, all standard contact center processes needs to accommodate to that new sets of measurements. But again, I'm not saying that we should abandon service level, average handling time, etc. Just a kind of defocusing is needed. First of all, to provide better experience, and then also for agents to ensure their well-being and their mental health.
Thank you. Amanda, have you got any thoughts on solutions to help well-being in the contact center?
Yeah, definitely. In addition to those great recommendations, I think acknowledging that your routing strategy has to be up to speed. So if there is a particular agent or pool of agents that are really good at addressing a particular complex issue, that we route to those agents. But not only that, we allow those kind of the less performing agents to learn from those great agents. So like using the likes of AI for routing, not just routing based on next available agent, but actually maybe letting the customer wait a couple of minutes longer in order to match them with the right agent that's going to be that's going to help them solve their problem. But not only that, looking at things like NPS instead of just your AHT, to ensure that we are doing a good service to the customer, which will grow the business and revenues in the long term.
That's really interesting, and I think if you look at how the industry's developed over the last probably decade or more, it's been very much focused on efficiency and the kind of bulk routing of contacts from the customer through to the agent, and first come first serve. Whereas I think what you're saying is with the advent of some of the cloud platforms, with more data being available, we can be far more precise and targeted with matching a customer with an agent and actually getting them through to the right person, and giving them tasks, if you like, that they're much better equipped to solve.
Yeah, 100%. And there's obviously other stuff that you can look at as well, such as more efficient scheduling that will enable that work-life balance. And if it's a large organization, if one site is getting hammered with calls and chats, having the ability to switch the traffic to another site that can help with that capacity issue. So having those solutions in place will allow your contact center not to get overburdened when it is if there's a surge in contact.
Yeah, brilliant. Natalie, what are your thoughts on solutions for mental health and wellbeing?
Yeah, I think, again, I agree with Amanda that work-life balance is really important. And for me, flexibility, so allowing your employees to kind of do more flexible shifts, understand when's a good time for them to work based on everything else that's going on in their home life. And I think that's become really sort of paramount over the last 2 years, in the fact that everyone's trying to juggle so much, right, in their home life as well as work life. So having those tools that Chris will be very familiar with around the sort of workforce management, being able to provide that sort of flexible shifting, allowing employees to build in preferences. And we're seeing a lot more organisations that are saying, right, you let us know when's a good time for you to work, and that has been proven that you get much more productivity from those things. But also for me, I'm seeing a lot of our customers build these sort of mental health champions. It's not just about the tools and the technology, it's having the support within the organisation. And I think there's more sort of these mental health champions, which is a go-to person where people know that there's an element of reassurance and support. It's often actually employees that have been through some mental health challenges, so they've had the real world experiences, and they're becoming a real sort of support mechanism for all of the other employees within that organisation. There's a lot more health and well-being as well that we're seeing that are being played into sort of a daily day in the life of an agent, and a lot more sort of sessions with minds massage and how to say no, and more of those sort of soft skills as well of how do you really manage everything that's going on and stay productive, and then still meet all of these rigorous KPIs that we've just been talking about. But also creating a more fun and engaging environment. And Amanda mentioned gamification earlier on in the call. So sharing reward and recognition and positive results, I think, is really important as well. We saw morale went right down last year because of this sort of constant mundane call after call, interaction after interaction with just irate and stressful customers. So again, sharing rewards, recognition for people going above and beyond, and then using those tools to, you know, build that sort of gamification and fun factor into the daily lives.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalie. Chris, this is an area I guess that you've got a fair amount of experience in as well.
Yeah, and you know, everything that everyone said, I'd kind of echo, especially around. And sometimes it's not about deploying a new solution; it's using the solutions that you've already got in place in a different way to drive a different outcome. And I think that's where I've spent a lot of the time over the last couple of years. People saying we want to be able to do this, and I went, well, you can. You just need to use this slightly differently, and you can actually achieve that. So I think some of that's education around what tools they've already got and what that can drive. To Natalie's point, flexible scheduling has been massive this last kind of 18 months, 2 years, and not just around when people work, about actually understanding what activities people can do. So what they have done traditionally in the past, and that kind of, you know, if I'm taking calls, for example, that's what I've been doing, that's been my job. But actually look at the broader estate and not just scheduling for the times that they that they're available, but scheduling the activities around that to go, okay, so let's give some more variety, let's give you some things that are going to actually push you and challenge you and do the things rather than it being mundane. And Stuart, you mentioned earlier on, you know, it can be quite isolating when you're sitting at home, when you're used to being around a team. And if that is the situation, one way to kind of counteract that is to give variety of kind of activity to do during the day, so that mundane kind of, you know, task after task isn't there. They've got some different kind of capabilities to do different things. I think that's been really powerful. And I think the other side to it is around how we utilize the information that the solutions that we've got in place tell us. So in the past, traditionally, we would use that to performance management people. So if performance dips, but we know, you know, or we should know as kind of business leaders, when we see that data, that if we are in a position where demand is high and service levels are low, and those things, we should know that trigger is going to be, there's going to be a detrimental impact on our people at that point. So what can we do from an intervention perspective to make sure our people are being supported during those busy times? I think, and using performance data at an individual level to understand what's driving that, because traditionally people that underperform, there's a reason behind why they're underperforming at that time. So rather than using that data to chastise and kind of try and drive and have a conversation around your AHT needs to improve or whatever, it's using that information to maybe utilize someone like a, you know, a health and wellbeing champion or mindfulness coach or whatever those things are. Go, okay, so what is driving that performance? Really start to understand people. So not just using the tools for their traditional output, but using the tools to really give a supportive organisation. The point we're at the minute, you mentioned it really on, Stuart, is around agent attrition. At this moment in time, and at this, over these last couple of years, people are going to remember how they've been treated during the difficult situations that they found themselves in. And this is the point from an organisational perspective, to make sure those supporting mechanisms are in place, because people won't remember the kind of the other stuff. They'll remember where they've not felt supported. They'll remember where they've been kind of had a difficult conversation because they've not been performing well, where they weren't offered flexibility when they needed flexibility. Those are the things that are going to stick in people's minds, and those are the things that are going to lead people to move on and find employment elsewhere. So I think we've got a real kind of opportunity to make sure those things are in place using the tools that we've got available to us.
Brilliant. Some really, really good, great points there. You know, reusing existing tools, measuring the right things, making sure that we're thinking about routing and how we distribute work, you know, thinking about scheduling and how we can make sure that we're flexible around the individual, but also a variety of work there, Chris, as you mentioned. Really interesting point, making sure that we get, there's some variation in the work that people do. We've just got 5 minutes left now, so I'm just going to ask each of you to go around and maybe starting with you, Amanda, if you've got any examples of organisations who have successfully implemented a human service strategy and not lost the human touch.
Yeah, well, it's quite hard to pick one, but one that really sticks in my head is Ethiopian Airlines. So Ethiopian Airlines, obviously with every airline every airline in the industry went through a serious surge in refund requests, and you know, just their businesses were turned up on its head within a few weeks. So they're using Genesys Cloud CX to really help understand what is that surge looking like? So they had access to real-time data to really help them forecast the capacity that they needed and to schedule resources to ensure that not only were they able to service their customers, but they had the right agents to do that, and AHT wasn't too long, etc. And you know, they actually thought they had to hire an extra 100 people to serve all of these additional contacts. But what they were doing was they were leveraging some AI and digital solutions. So the digital people were able to self-serve on digital, so that obviously took some of the contacts away. But then, you know, looking at that real-time data, they were really able to forecast properly, which meant that they had the right resources there. And not only that, the agents had that digital insight. So when they were contacting, their agent was able to see, okay, if you were trying to request a refund online, or you know what you were trying to do online prior to contacting the contact center. So yeah, just one example, as we've probably all have many in the last 18 months.
Yeah, great. And that sounds like a nice joined up experience. Natalie, a quick example from you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I guess the one for me is a joint customer of ours, Stu, is Allianz Direct, and they've got this self-managing teams approach. And actually, it's one of many customers now that are taking this approach, which is where the individual teams and advisors within that team decide what they work on and when they work on it. So they're kind of managing their own daily activities and and they pick and choose what they want to work on and when. And then alongside that is this sort of dynamic and evolving agent desktop that they've created. So every time it's a new interaction, you could get a different type of information that's appearing on the screen. And what we've been able to see is they've gone from like 20 apps down to sort of 2 to 5. So removing all of that frustration around having to sort of toggle between all of those different applications. And as you've got in your ebook, you know, the sickness has reduced from 13% down to 3% because of this agile model. So allowing and empowering your advisors to have complete autonomy as to what they do and how they spend their day, I think is a real sort of shift in what we're seeing across many contact centers actually. And it's really reassuring to see that new approach.
Agree, yeah, but very innovative approach, award-winning. You know, they're doing some great stuff at Allianz. Chris, just briefly from you, any examples you'd like to share? I think you're muted, Chris.
Sorry, right at the end, and we messed it up. Yeah, no, so there's been loads this year, but I think one that stood out for me this year, we did a lot of work with West Sussex County Council, and purely around kind of how they distribute work, going back to the point that we looked at before in terms of keeping an eye on our wellness and well-being of staff. And they had a lot of administrative burden on their team leaders, and what they wanted to do was free up that activity or free up their capacity to be able to spend time. So we introduced kind of automated work allocation for their team, so that was prioritizing the work to make sure that the citizens of the local council were being protected and supported through the pandemic, but also freeing up a lot of management time to be able to actually spend that time with their people to make sure they are coping with the distributed work, they're coping with working from home, they're coping with the challenges that COVID would bring in them. And I just thought that was a really looking at what the technology can do for them, existing technology that they already had, how they can utilize it differently to find the time they needed to support their people. And that was really powerful for me this year.
Thank you, Chris. Tverko, last word from you, if that's okay.
So I will not mention one single company, but I will tell what the best have in common. And this is that they are abandoning transactional approach to employee experience and introducing employee journey to capture all important moments in life cycle of employee, just like CX programs did for customer in the past. And then they are connecting this employee journey with customer journey, looking for the dependencies. And they are also actively surveying employee journey at every touch point. And they are really focusing on 4 things. These are work complexity, how to decrease it, and then some behavioral norms around creativity, around empowerment, and around collaboration. And they are across employee journey working to improve those things in order to improve employee experience and to consequently improve customer experience also. So this is common for companies that are leading in this area that you are mentioning.
Thank you, Tverko. That's a really nice point to end on. So I just want to thank all of our panelists here today. Some really brilliant insights, and I think what's very clear is that the industry is shifting back towards the humans and the people in the organisation and humanising that experience. So we've spent many years focusing on digital. We're now rebalancing that with humans, but we do need to start taking welfare and well-being as a more important focus, particularly for our contact centre agents who have had a really tough couple of years on the front line dealing with customer inquiries. As the guys mentioned, we've got an ebook which talks in a lot of detail about this, so please jump on the website and download it. But thank you very much for everyone for joining us today, and thanks again to the participants. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.